All right, so why don't we have about 10 minutes for questions before our panel is going to come up. So we'll maybe 4 or 5 questions. Catherine is going first, it looks like.
Eleanor and I were wondering, given Yuri's brilliant conversation about business people in the states of Texas and Massachusetts, I would like to know how many business leaders are in this audience. So my question is, how do we, as a group, have the business leaders of Silicon Valley hear what we just heard and do something about it?
Lisa's here. She's a business leader. We got one.
We'll do another one.
And we have some SV2 partners here too who are business leaders, but not some of the current key leadership. What thoughts?
Go ahead.
So I mean, I would say it's a great question, and that I don't think people in business are thinking that schools are preparing kids to enter the workforce and thrive in the workforce. More and more, when we enter a job, we are expected to learn on the job about what that job entails and to start a career long of learning and growth. And so I think that that's what businesses are looking for in people, is kind of that efficacy and drive toward learning and continued growth, which I think schools can and have to provide, but they're not providing. I think that there's a great opportunity in schools being in businesses being here today and being part of this conversation, but for one reason, which is to figure out how to improve schools. But part of that is also to learn from businesses about what they're doing, what they need, but also what's happening in that business environment that we can apply to schools. So for example, in Silicon Valley, in the entrepreneurship community, there's a big movement going on where you talk to any entrepreneur and they talk about the lean startup way. And this has been huge in entrepreneurship for the last few years. And it's all about learning. So you go into these startups, and they're doing experiments every day. I mean, in Facebook, there's hundreds of experiments every day where they are continuing to learn as an organization, as individuals as well. So these are amazing learning environments, and the people who are joining these learning environments are becoming learners from being part of that environment and going through that process. I think we have a lot to learn from businesses to bring it to our schools to better prepare students for that environment.
Let me add to that one of the reasons businesses are no longer leading, they never did in California, but in other states, is that globalization and productivity essentially change the structure of businesses and their essential commitments. They're less committed to place, and they have fewer people who can do this kind of work. So in the next era, it's philanthropic and civic leaders. What's needed is an extra legislative coherent force that holds a long-term vision. It could be the philanthropic community. It needs to be an independent community with resources and power that holds the legislature to a longer view. And half tongue-in-cheek, the other strategy is change the law so that every state does elect a governor and a legislature, but then we randomly assign those people to serve in other states. And you know, that just a modest proposal that somebody want to consider.
Okay, next question. Yes.
I'm Joe Ross from the county.
Yeah. So when you look at the data, this is like when you read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Kuhn pointed out that people can have completely conflicting ideas of the world and not have their heads blow up. So on one hand, you have the theory that it's about human capital. Put wonderful people in schools and they will change learning, except that they don't. Because Saracen said, 1952, you put a great person in a bad system, system wins every time. Then there's research which shows curriculum has big effects. And then there's research, probably the best piece of educational research in 30 years is Tony Brike's, which shows that good practices, structures, rituals, and routines are key to good schools, but relational trust as catalyzed by leaders matters more. He showed in Chicago no interventions effectively changed student performance over time unless the cultural conditions in school were right. So we don't have perfect knowledge, but we know that we need to deal with the system level of schooling if individuals at the child and teacher level are going to work. And this is manageable. Long Beach, Hillsborough, Sanger, dramatically higher proportions of kids learning at high levels than in other places. Those are the lessons from those issues. But it does require a community holding schools to a collective vision. When you don't have that, and you have to worry about building support for public education, that's where you get all the charter solutions and things of this sort. And in the aggregate also don't make that much of a difference. This is a hard question about the purposes of schooling in our society and the structures of schools that make adults and kids want to be there. So read Organizing Schools for Improvement by Tony Brike. It changed a lot of things that I used to believe.
And Tony is right here now in California.
Yep, down the block.
At
Brilliant.
the Carnegie Center for Advancement of Teaching and Learning, right, at Stanford. He's the director there now. So we've gotten him from Chicago right here in our community. Next question. Yes, Julie.
Hi, so Kelly and I were talking about some of these structural issues. This kind of follows on to what you were alluding to, but did the governor's board go far enough? They identified 5 key actions that needed to, take place for change, but teacher professionalism, training, financing seems like really core. How can we make any progress with the way teachers, are trained and financed today and what's going on there?
There's a famous paper in the business literature called The Folly of Rewarding A and Hoping for B. One of the classic papers in management theory. You probably studied this in your management days. We need to get the signaling right. Coherence is what matters. We need to rethink teaching as a profession. It's not actually a profession now in any standard meaning of the term. Teachers don't select their members. They don't sanction their members. It's not really a profession. So there's a cascade of things that has to happen. But one should not think that the U.S. doesn't have the capacity to do this. Finland, Japan, Korea went through processes where they went from very low performance to substantially higher performance. And in all cases, it was the result of national will and leadership. We can't have a system in which every teacher is rated perfect. But we can't tackle that problem in ways that demoralize the millions of people who are in classrooms. Teacher morale is now at a 25-year low. So these are the challenges the community has to deal with. How do we make clear what our hopes are for children? How do we ensure that all the policy signals align with those hopes and the funding formulas actually support the goals we have? That's the real systemic work. Sounds hard and abstract, and it makes people run to easy solutions, but resist running to easy solutions to fundamental problems. What it looks like from an outside, when I visit communities of philanthropists, is they get frustrated at the magnitude of the problem. If this were health, they'd go, let's go with vitamin B6. Maybe vitamin E and vitamin B6 are the solutions. They're easy to understand. They have clear effects. But if you step back and you look at the magnitude of the problem, it's really a delusion. It's system leadership in California. Look at the magnitude of difference. How could it be that Texas, of all places, in every single test, not just NAEP, but all the released commercial tests, is 2 years ahead of California? How could that be? That has to do with the internal structure of teacher and leadership training, theories of school improvement. When you're in a California school, and Linda can attest to this, we spend a lot of time in schools. If you're in Hillsborough or you're in Long Beach is the exception, teachers actually have a collective sense of what they're doing, and they have structures to act collectively on student improvement. Most schools in California have this dysfunctional mythology of autonomy, where the teacher acts as a complete individual. You can't improve a system with tens of thousands of people working to get better in their own ways. And the culture of California supports that. That can't possibly work for children. These are the problems to work on. They're not going to be easy, and it will require this community to be clear about what it needs from its schools.
I would add that to your question about did the board go far enough? So, for example, does the Common Core go far enough? I think kind of the short answer for me is no, in that it is a huge step forward in developing in students the higher order thinking and critical thinking skills and performance skills that is going to help them throughout their lives. And it makes some reference to motivation and persistence and these learning to learn processes. In my opinion, it doesn't have enough emphasis on being deliberate about developing those learning to learn skills in students so that they are better, more effective learners at those critical thinking and performance skills, as well as outside of school and beyond school. But one thing that the Common Core does, and by the way, I think that some states are recognizing this and they're working on Common Core Plus, the same people who started on Common Core. So there's continued reform that is going on in this area. But I do think that the Common Core creates an amazing opportunity. It creates the conditions for us to come together, think about these issues, and for leaders to take it further, and for states or districts to do what they think is important for kids. So there is going to be a lot of change, and one question we need to ask ourselves is how can we make the most out of that opportunity?
Okay, I want to transition us now to our panel where we're going to start talking about implementation, and I want to thank, there's so many more questions I know bubbling up in the room. And so I hope you'll get to eventually ask those questions. But I want to give Dr. Treisman and Eduardo a round of applause and call our panel up. Thank you.
Thank you. Fun.